what's that bull rider that he's a world class now? Is Cooper?
Cooper Davis.
Cooper Davis.
So,
Cole?
boy that's raised
Cole
here.
fought.
Cole said it. You remember Cole?
Yes, sir.
Cole told me one time they was at a rodeo and they all carried their bags down a long string of rooms, and he just went in his and throwed it down, and Cooper just come in and kicked that stuff out of the way and laid his down. Cooper was in the wrong room, I think, accidentally, and Cole said, I just got up and decked him. And he landed flat of his back on the floor, and I just stood there and looked at him and said, he got up and beat the shit out of me.
He said he saw him later at a rodeo and they shook hands.
I imagine he said he learned if you had a guy down, don't let him up.
Especially if he's a world champion bull rider.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I just thought when he was telling me how many, that kid's been riding bulls for 10 years at the top echelon, and he's tough.
Yes,
he
sir.
Couldn't be there.
Yes, sir. Was there a lot of fighting back in the day on the wagon?
No, I've seen 2 or 3, really, two of the best fights I've ever seen in my life, because it was among good, tough men in their 30s that were tough and wanted to fight,
Yes, sir.
And they were really fought. One of them was one of the most, I never seen 2 guys fight. And it was at the Chuck Wagon way out in the country. There's a guy fired, the boy running the wagon fired this boy, and he left, and it'd been gone about 2 months. And he just drove up there at the wagon, and we had just jogging up there, and stepped off our horses, tied them to some trees, fixing to eat dinner. And this wagon boss was pulling his had unbuckled his chaps and started. And this guy just walked out there. We ain't seen or heard of him in 3 months, since he left. And he said, I come back here to whip your bam. And man, he popped that wagon rod right on the chin, and they went to battle, and they hated each other. And they was both in their 30s. And they fought and rested and fought and rested and fought the third leg. And they fought and rested and fought and rested, and finally that guy got up, and they're both bleeding, their mouth was busted and their nose. He just got up and said, I've always respected him for this, because he just got up and said, well, 6 or 8, 10 men standing around there watching. Got up, straightened himself up and said, well, I drove up here from Odessa to whip your ass and can't do it, and walked out there and got in his car and left. I never did see him again. But boy, they fought. And old J.R. Edwards and me was sitting on the side of the wagon. We had to hold our feet up. One time they got to fighting right there on the edge of the fight. And that J.R. tough cook, he punched me and said, I can whip both of them. I can whip both of them. I thought, well, he probably could.
Tell the one about the wagon cook.
That's J.R. and the cook. J.R. was bad to fight, and still has all of his life. He fought here, and he fought at Matadors, and he fought at Wagner's, and he fought at the Pitchforks. There's places he whipped somebody at the Matadors and everywhere. And he's a bad hombre, and he still lives there in Thalia right now. He's a couple of years younger than me, so he's 87 or 8 and not in too good a shape now. But he was bad news, and he'd tell you he'd rather fight than to argue. But the cook made an announcement one morning, and this cook was a bad dude. I was scared to death of him, and I worked there for several years with him. But this cook said the next man that pitches one of these plates in this Roundup tub when I'm washing dishes, I'm going to whip his rear. He's a bad hombre, and because it's full of soap. And J.R. told me the next morning, we was camped at Little Six. It was dark, wasn't light yet. 2 boys had just left to go get the horses. And he said, watch this. he just sailed the plate back from me to you in there. Blondie just picked the pot hook up and turned and made a necktie out of it for JR out of that iron pot hook, and they went to Fifth City, and Blondie was about 50 and JR was 22, but Blondie was mean, tough something, and they was really fighting. They fought there, and nobody done anything. We just all watched. Blondie's hat fell off in the fire pit and burned up. And,
Why didn't you grab it for him?
I didn't want to do anything. And directly old Blondie grabbed that shovel that he used to put coals under the Dutch ovens and stuff, and took that back and backed JR up about far from here to you, and then whirled and grabbed a 12-gauge shotgun laying on the side of the chuck wagon. And I never will forget, he just whirled and squatted, and I remember his hands was just white. He squatted with that, pumped a shell in that thing and said, "Come under here and I'll cut you in two."
Dang.
And JR said, "I don't think you've got the nerve." And I never will forget, because Blondie is just as quiet. And he said, "Come under here and see." And somebody said, "Horses there," and they turned around and went to the corral.
Golly.
Do you think he would have done it?
I think he'd had to, because if JR had come under there, he'd have beat him to death. You know?
Golly.
And you know, they worked together there for a year or two after that. With 7 days a week we had.
They were good.
I bet
good
nobody-
after that.
Huh?
They were good after that.
Yeah.
I bet nobody threw their dishes in that. They didn't want to be at the end of that shotgun
Set them in there
anymore.
real nice.